Hello, everyone. I'm Anita Vogel, your host for the evening, and welcome to CSuite Focus Live. We have a great show for you tonight. Many of you have attended our CSuite Focuses before and our CFO Focus. Now we are live streaming so we can share some very timely information with you in these very surprising times. Our theme for this episode of CSuite Focus is the October surprise, managing through resiliency. And many of you might be surprised to learn that the October surprise goes beyond just politics. For example, we all saw in the news recently about the E. coli outbreak that was linked to McDonald's. That spread across 13 states, 75 people have fallen ill, and one person has died. A very terrible situation for McDonald's. Let's take a look at some of the news coverage of this event.
Tonight, the deadly E. coli outbreak linked to McDonald's is expanding. The CDC now reporting cases in 3 more states, a total of 13 states now. At least 75 people sick and 22 hospitalized. 1 person has died. And tonight we have learned 900 restaurants have been affected. This evening, why health officials are concerned about the danger from this particular strain of E. coli. ABC's Mola Lenghi in Colorado on this again tonight.
Tonight, the CDC says they've confirmed 75 cases of E. coli linked to McDonald's. The outbreak spreading to 13 states. While the cause of the outbreak has not been definitely determined, federal regulators are looking at raw slivered onions served on their quarter pounders as the likely source. Health officials are particularly concerned about this strain of E. coli because it can cause a life-threatening condition called hemolytic uremic syndrome, which can cause kidney failure. It's mostly common in young children.
The cramps were unbearable.
Clarissa DeBach got sick, but is thankful her 2-year-old son, who got some of her fries, didn't get a bite of her burger.
It's just really scary to think if he would have, by chance gotten a bite of it or touched it and then touched his mouth.
McDonald's supplier of the onions, Taylor Farms, says they recalled them out of an abundance of caution, and McDonald's has pulled the quarter pounder off the menu entirely in 900 restaurants in affected areas. They've also ceased doing business with Taylor Farms indefinitely. As a precaution, Burger King, Taco Bell, Pizza Hut, and KFC have all pulled onions off their menus.
Well, David, more cases will likely be reported to the CDC by people who got sick weeks ago. But because of actions taken by McDonald's and Taylor Farms, the CDC believes, at least at this point, the ongoing risk to the public is low, David.
Mola Lenghi on this again tonight. Thanks, Mola.
All right, so a nightmare situation for any corporation or company. We're going to get the thoughts of our panel on this in just a moment. But first, let's go ahead and introduce our panel of experts for this evening. First, we have Jeremy Baumann. He is the CEO of Corporate Security Advisors. He leads a team of former CIA, FBI, and corporate security leaders. Welcome, Jeremy.
Thanks, Anita. Glad to be on the show with you.
Yeah, glad to have you. Joining Jeremy is risk mitigation expert Rebekah Schaapveld from Lockton Insurance. Hi, Rebekah.
Hi, Anita. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, great to have you here. And last but not least, Jenny West. She is a workplace futurist. What an interesting title. And she's also a change expert from West Consulting, and she helps companies rethink their workplace and employee experience. Welcome to all of you. Happy to have you here. Jeremy, let me say this first, so our audience knows we are live right now on LinkedIn Live, X, YouTube, and Instagram. So to be sure, please, to share all of this with your coworkers. Jeremy, I want to start with you. Tell us about your company and explain exactly what you do for other companies.
Absolutely. Thanks, Anita. Well, Corporate Security Advisors is a management consulting firm that's focused on helping businesses grow really strong, resilient security programs that are founded in 3 core concepts. First, thinking about everything from a risk-based, business-based focusing on mitigation and prevention rather than reacting to situations. And finally, ensuring that they have the people, process, and technology to effectively manage through incidents and crisis.
And how do these companies benefit from these former FBI and CIA leaders that you have? I bet that they're able to share a wealth of knowledge with your companies.
Well, absolutely. Our people are the difference. So our people have experience and success in both the public sector and in the boardroom. And what they've done with their careers in national security, intelligence, federal law enforcement, and their backgrounds in keeping bad things from happening, quite frankly, in the public sector, is they've been able to successfully translate that to the business world, where they can help private sector organizations protect their people and their livelihoods.
Yeah, great resource to have. Okay, over to you, Rebekah. Tell us what you do for your companies, or tell us what you do, at your company and the important role that you play there.
Yeah, thanks, Anita. So Rebekah Schaapveld, producer partner at Lockton Companies. And Lockton is the largest privately held insurance broker, not carrier. So we're not like a nationwide in the globe. And basically, to boil it down, what we do is we help people protect their people and their businesses and their balance sheet. And that's in regards to known risk, like what happened at McDonald's, as well as emerging risks when you talk about geopolitical and or regulatory, like mandating wages in California.
Okay, wonderful. We're going to get to more of that in just a bit. Want to ask you first, just to react, all of you, about this situation at McDonald's. How would you advise McDonald's, if you were advising them, to handle this? The ramifications are really so terrible. One person has died and the situation is still developing. Jeremy, why don't you jump in there?
Yeah, absolutely, Anita. So first of all, McDonald's has a very skilled security team, intelligence team, and corporate communications team. And they know that handling a situation like this requires empathy. It requires communicating expertise, commitment, and transparency. And I think the actions that they've taken have shown that they're getting ahead of the problem. This is the type of situation that, as was pointed out, it's an anticipated problem that a corporation like McDonald's is going to have to face. And they have put these resources in place and built this skill over decades of business to be able to react to situations appropriately like this.
No doubt. Jenny, you deal with the employee part of this. So how would you go into a company like McDonald's and advise the employees in this situation?
Yeah, well, it's so important to have an omni-channel communication plan where you're not only addressing your external stakeholders and clientele, but internally you have given your managers a, hey, heads up, here's what we're doing. And then the core, I think, foundation of what people really want is, number one, here's what we know, right? Now, here's what's next and what we're working on. And then the next plan is really what to expect. So you're kind of, mitigating surprises as much as possible and making your employees feel like they're part of the strategy, not just waiting to hear what you say externally. There's a little bit of a difference there.
Yeah, absolutely. The employees definitely want to be kept up to speed. And Rebekah, from an insurance point of view, this has just got to be a nightmare.
Yes, we deal with these a lot. And this is a nightmare for McDonald's in particular, because it really wasn't their fault. They had the best plan possible. And this just goes to show the importance of third-party vendors and making sure that your risk management strategies not only are sufficient for yourself, but that all of your vendors are following the same thing, because, something like this happens and they did everything right and they inherited this risk. And now it's their name, it's their reputation, it's their sales that are going to be affected, as well as Taylor Farms too. But it just goes to show how connected the supply chain is. You inherit risks that aren't even yours.
Yeah, from the third-party vendors and all of the companies you deal with, right? Okay, I want to set the tone and tell everybody that we're going to be breaking up the discussion tonight into 3 different themes overall. So we're going to first talk about the geopolitical situation, elections in the US. We have one coming up, don't we? And elsewhere in the world. Second, workforce resilience. What expectations do people have? What's the cost of turnover these days? And finally, reputational harm, which we know is a big problem for any company out there. Just look at McDonald's, right? So let's start with geopolitical concerns and civil unrest due to the fact that we are 1 week away from the US election. Jeremy, let me ask you, how do you advise clients who are concerned about possible post-election unrest? And that is a real thing.
Absolutely, Anita. And it's the number one question that we're getting right now is what organizations need to be thinking about in terms of what's going to happen on November 6th after the election. And the bottom line is whether it's what's going to happen on November 6th or what's going to happen in January around the certification of the election or the inauguration, what's happening with Russia, Ukraine, North Korea, what's happening with Iran and Israel. You can take any one of those situations and you can try and look into your crystal ball and predict what's going to be happening so that you can react better. But at the end of the day, what we advise our clients to do is not scenario-based planning, because there are so many different scenarios out there that organizations may have to react to, but to moreover think about impact-based planning. You know, most of these teams that are navigating these incidents and crises and changing situations like this are used to doing this from a business perspective in the C-suite and the boardroom. But the question is, can they do it in terms of once the impact has happened? Can they communicate with their people without their IT technology stack? Can they communicate with each other and bring together a meeting if they're not all able to get to the same building? Can they communicate with their employees at 2 o'clock in the morning when their IT network is down? How do they function if there's an impact to the electric power grid? With the appropriate level of preparation and practice and working through tabletop exercises, that's really how organizations, businesses become resilient, by practicing through the impact-based planning rather than trying to predict the outcome of a particular scenario.
Yeah, and for, you know, given the particular company, they might have to be dealing with these situations internationally. I mean, what about companies that have employees in Israel, right? What were they doing on October 7th? So just a quick follow-up here to Jeremy. I'll give you 30 seconds. How do you advise international companies that may have, you know, operations or employees in regions of conflict?
Well, absolutely. I mean, companies have a duty of care responsibility to know where their employees are, to be able to track their employees and provide care for them regardless of where they're at. So internationally, domestically, while on travel, in the workplace, and decades of experience doing this across my professional career and our teams, you have to be able to know where your employees are when something happens. You should be proactively providing them intelligence and updates. You as an organization should be monitoring developing situations and providing those updates in real time. And I can tell you, you know, just from examples like the Ataturk airport bombing in Turkey, our teams were in communication with travelers on the ground there within moments of that explosion happening. Wow. We had evacuation arranged for those employees to be able to get them out of country within minutes after that actual event happened. And that's only through preparation. That's having the vendors in place to be able to conduct those evacuations. That's having good connections internally with your travel department to be able to rearrange flights. But it's being able to get in contact with those people real time when that explosion's happening after 10 p.m. local time in Turkey. Just a great example how the right preparation allows companies to react quickly and keep their people out of harm's way.
Yeah, that's great. And Rebekah, really the same question to you. How do you see best practices in situations like that? Not, you know, reacting, but being prepared for conflict.
So from the insurance carrier standpoint and risk management, it's really communication with the corporations on how to handle and really scenario planning for your company and your employees on how certain things should be handled, what's okay and not okay within the office environment. But for the insurance carrier side on the risk, absolutely. I mean, they're nervous on what could happen as far as, you know, we've seen things happen in the past where there was vandalism and all sorts of damage done. And hopefully that's not the case here. You know, I hope it's a situation where that's not the case. And we have to keep in mind too, when whichever president gets into office, they're not president quite yet. And there's still a plan for the current administration to be able to de-escalate anything that does. They're also planning for things like that. So it's something that our industry is keeping an eye on, but hopefully that doesn't head in that direction.
And following up on that, how do you think this election will affect the insurance industry?
Yeah, you know, if you look back in history with different administrations, we can, without having a crystal ball looking forward, you kind of can see certain things that are affected directly. That would be monetary policy, tax, regulatory. So those kinds of things would feed investments and whether or not a company would choose to invest onshore, offshore. So there's quite a bit that would be affected depending on which administration's in office or if it's a split one. But that being said, the right answer would be Jeremy talked about scenario planning with your team. And when you have a binary event, like a political event and or reputational harm, like the McDonald's situation, you really need to plan for all scenarios. And that's why that's important, because whether it's one way or the other, you should be ready to go either way. But there are certain policies that will directly affect the insurance industry and businesses too.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Jenny, you deal a lot with Gen Z when you go into a company, right? How do you think this whole idea of preparing for election unrest resonates with Gen Z?
Yeah, well, I think Gen Z is super interesting because something that's very new with this demographic is that they are very socially active. They're known for their activism and outspokenness. And something that's really different is that they see their employer as an extension of their own personal values and brand. And so as a result, they expect their employer to really be vocal and transparent with what's going on. So, Gen Z, they are absolutely expecting transparency. They also would like a place to go and feel they can, share what's important to them. This is a young demographic. And so you've probably seen, there's a rise in employee resource groups. This is a really safe space for people to say what's important to them and also be aware of the wellness and mental health resources available to them in case, after the election, they want a little time to rebound. So I think, just good communication, helping the younger demographic, have a professional outlet, but also understand where to go if they want to take some time after an event like that.
Yeah, it seems that this generation really expects that now. They expect their employers to provide health counseling and wellness counseling for things like election unrest and other things too, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that we're entering this world where, the employee and the employer relationship has moved from maybe the paternalism, right, into more of a consumeristic relationship where it's like, listen, if I have some unmet need, I expect my employer to respond to that. And I think, mental health is something that most Gen Z considers as a basic benefit and a basic standard of care from their employer, not as a nice to have, but certainly just like dental and vision, they're expecting mental health resources as well. And we know that this generation as a demographic, they're really destigmatizing mental health. This is something they're unashamed to admit and unashamed to talk about. And in fact, by talking more outspoken fashion about it, they feel like they're helping others. So whether that's about cognitive diversity or mental health, etc., these are issues that they are proud of wearing as an intersectional kind of identity.
Yeah, they definitely bring something new to the table, that's for sure. Okay, I want to wrap up this first segment on geopolitical risk by going around and asking a final question and just a brief answer, if you would. Rebekah, I'll start with you. Do you feel like your company is prepared for election unrest? Do you feel like you've done the planning and you're ready for whatever outcome might happen?
I'm lucky to be at an insurance broker, so we definitely are ready. I feel like we can advise others if we didn't take our own advice. So yes, I feel blessed. We are ready, and we're very communicative. And we have like Jenny said, we have lots of outlets and lots of subgroups to be able to communicate openly in a safe free zone. And the culture, there's not only a physical but a psychological safety that resides within Lockton that I hope other companies have as well.
Okay, that's good. And Jeremy, what about the companies that you advise, that you work with? Do you feel like there are companies that are going into this election a little nervous?
Absolutely, Anita. It's natural to be nervous in a situation like this with so much at stake in the election. I think that it's a busy time for us right now because organizations are understanding the business benefit of being prepared. So working with a lot of different clients right now to help them get prepared, to make sure that their leadership teams have the confidence that they're ready to navigate whatever uncertain times are ahead.
Mm-hmm. And Jenny, final thought to you. What about the companies that you work with? Do you feel like they feel that they're prepared, or are they feeling like they haven't tied up all those loose ends yet?
Well, I think it depends on the organization. Some companies, they aren't that comfortable with talking, kind of out loud about different politics or issues of the day. Other companies are very comfortable. So really kind of depends on who we're speaking to. But what I will say in a unanimous takeaway would be, I would encourage all companies to really think about a leadership moment and double down on, telling your employees that you value them, giving them a transparent message, and reminding them of any resources that might be helpful during this time.
Yeah, that's always a good message. Okay, great, guys. Great discussion. We are going to hit our first break here. But when we come back, we are going to talk about reputational harm and how companies manage through that crisis. That's going to be when we come back, so stay with us.
Independence. It's not just how you think, but how you act. It's not being different for the sake of different. It's different for the sake of being better. Independence is the reason Lockton people always do what's right for our clients. It's why we're all empowered to go above and beyond, to help them respond quickly to changing markets and growing risks. It's a way of thinking that started 50 years ago with Jack Lockton in Kansas City and now stretches across the globe. For us, independence changes everything. It allows us to think bigger, explore further, and focus on what really matters. It's the innovative spirit that gives our clients never thought of that before solutions, rather than one size fits no one. And while independence is a rarity these days, for us, it's why we get up in the morning. Lockton, uncommonly independent.
Right. And we are back. Thank you for that. Right now, I want to take a question from Doug Corin. Until just a few weeks ago, he was the CFO at Tillamook. That's the dairy company, maker of some of our favorite cheeses, of course, and ice cream. So let's hear from Doug. He's got a question for us.
Hi, everyone. I'm Doug Corin, and it's a pleasure to meet you. From 2022 until recently, I was the CFO of Tillamook County Creamery Association, a co-op owned by dairy farmers best known for its cheese and ice cream, as well as other dairy products and now sold nationwide. I also was in management with Foster Farms and Conagra Foods and other food manufacturers over the past 30 years. Now, y'all may know that cooperatives, as well as vertically integrated food manufacturers for that matter, tend to be especially sensitive when it comes to food product quality and safety, as the owners and stakeholders of the business are essentially key suppliers to the business. So the question I have for you is this: what advice do you have on how best to communicate with stakeholders when a supply chain issue or crisis is unfolding? Thank you for taking the question.
All right. Well, that's a very timely question given what we were talking about with McDonald's. So, Jeremy, let me throw that one to you. How would you answer Doug's question?
Absolutely, Anita. We talked earlier in the McDonald's example. Anytime you're talking about crisis communications, you need to be communicating with empathy, with commitment to resolving the problem, with the right expertise behind it. But transparency is of utmost importance. And to Doug's question, in this case where you've got stakeholders who are critical suppliers to the business, you've got to be communicating in a way that is very transparent with the suppliers. Leaders have a tendency to want to fall into the expert trap and to really think about the problem from how they're going to solve it. And at the end of the day, if it's not a balanced message, if you're not being transparent with your stakeholders, it's not going to land as well. And nobody wants to be in the limelight. There's a desire to escape from the limelight when organizations, quite frankly, are in these type of situations. But if the last message that they leave out in the public domain is a negative one, then it's not going to land well for their brand and their organization's future. And it has real impact on stock price and shareholder value.
Well, it sure does. The McDonald's stock price dropped 7%, I think. And that was, after they had made some gains with their stock. So I'm sure it was so disappointing to the company and the shareholders. This whole issue goes to the heart of reputational harm. Rebekah, how do you define that? Reputational risk, reputational harm, and is it different than other kinds of risks that the company might endure?
Yeah, thanks, Anita. That's a really great question, one that the insurance market is still trying to grasp. It's really hard to define reputational harm, but the basic form would be any kind of financial impact that's happened because of something that's happened with reputation, whether it's whether it's foodborne illness or somebody's made a comment on your company and posted it and they've got 1 billion followers. Anything that would affect your sales would be considered, that would be the trigger for the insurance industry on payout.
Yeah, well, and speaking of posting, Gen Z likes to post a lot, and that can certainly harm companies if they give a bad review or post a negative comment, right, Jenny? How are companies dealing with that, with this new, not new, but their younger employees posting things that could really harm the reputation of the company?
Yeah, I mean, not limited to younger employees, but yes, I mean, Gen Z, they have a digital comfort. It's a positive predisposition of when they entered the world, right? Their entire adolescence has prepared them to be digitally savvy. They also are highly socially active and have a lot of volunteer and concerns about the world becoming a better place. And so, their activism is certainly something that they're really passionate about. And we spoke earlier too, that Gen Z does see their employer as an extension of their personal brand. So what happens when their employer has a blunder, right? It feels like they take it maybe in a personal way and want to do something to help. So right or wrong, we have a culture of activism. We saw this happen when Starbucks, right, was maybe rejecting the notion of unionization in 2022. And we saw hacktivists, right, flooding of fake job applications. Another one was, Facebook, when they saw that there was a whistleblower talking about negative implication to mental health due to the use of the software. And the younger generation pioneered a digital protest, a hashtag delete Facebook. So some of this stuff can really domino quickly. And, in a good and potentially risky way. This digital comfort of Gen Z is something to just, again, scenario plan for and hopefully use it to your advantage.
Yeah. Yeah, all good points there. And Rebekah, I want to go back to you for a second. You're in the insurance industry. It's a very litigious environment we're living in these days. So how does all of these people suing each other and suing companies affect the insurance industry?
Yes, Anita, that question is one that is probably one of the biggest factors into the rising cost for insurance on a variety of capacities. The litigious environment right now is being funded at around $17 billion in capital from private equity that's going into law firms because they know they'll win in court on a lot of these issues. And a lot of them are around class action issues with a group of people where they feel confident on the case. But think about the return on investment. And then you've got coupled on top of that, the social media and everything Jenny just talked about, the social media effect. Once someone finds out somebody else won that case, they feel more confident for taking someone to court and that they're going to win. And we've had a lot of companies that we work with maybe make a stance on, we're not going to take a stance on certain issues and try to kind of stay out of that, which I could understand that. The only thing they're going to want to consider is the culture within your people. They're still going to have things that come up, and how you handle those situations will be broadcasted. So if you're not scenario planning, it's okay not to make a stance on a certain topic, but if you're not scenario planning on how to navigate and communicate when those issues that you're choosing not to take a stance on come up in the workplace, you need to be ready to communicate and make sure it's the right communication, because it's really tough right now with how litigious everything is, and they're winning. Cases are getting won in court, and it's nuclear verdicts right now, which are anything over $100 million for settlements. We're seeing the most we've ever seen in the history right now.
Yeah.
So it really affects the industry quite a bit.
Well, yeah, and that that really adds up, and companies, that it hurts their bottom line. They have to pay out these lawsuits, right? Jeremy, I want to go back to you on something that you said about transparency being the key. Can you give us some examples? Talk about Hurricane Katrina, talk about, things that have happened at Walmart. Can you give us some real life examples?
Yeah, absolutely. Ken Sensor on our team was actually the SVP of security at Walmart when Katrina happened, and that's a prime example of how an organization can jump in a catastrophic event and actually improve their brand by doing everything they can to help out. I mean, without going into detail, if you look at I think there's a Harvard case study on that was actually done. You look at how Walmart has stepped in and helped so many people in Hurricane Katrina, and in doing so, just really became a beloved brand because of the assistance they were providing, things that they didn't have to do, stepping up when other agencies were falling short, and really putting their money where their mouth was in terms of being able to deliver critical help to people in need. That's the kind of situation where organizations have the ability to help in a catastrophic event like Hurricane Katrina. We've seen it happen in more recent events. Organizations that can step up and show that true culture, that's really the challenge to be met right now. You think about the cultural challenge that Rebekah outlined. We've got 5 generations in the workforce right now. It's the most number of generations that we've had in the workforce, and organizational leadership teams, they really have a challenge trying to navigate the differences between the wants of one end of the spectrum to the other. So being able to have a strong corporate culture, to be able to step up and help out in these cases, that's something that drives employee retention, that drives your brand reputation. It really is a best practice when you look at the right things to do when a situation like that occurs.
Yeah. And on a personal note, I covered Hurricane Katrina. I was on the ground for Fox News covering that when the hurricane came in, and I was there for 11 days after. And you mentioned critical need. I've never seen such a critical need from anyone other than that I saw in Hurricane Katrina. It was pretty unbelievable. So the fact that Walmart was able to step in and help like that is pretty extraordinary. Okay, great discussion, guys. We are going to take another break right now. And when we come back, we're going to talk about our third topic, and that is workplace resiliency and how to navigate resiliency. And what is resiliency? We're going to get you guys to define it for us when we come back.
There she is, Jade Ross. Best CTO in the game. Her cyber defense is fire.
Yeah, but Emily Foster? Corporate finance queen of Kansas City?
Wait, hold up. Is that
Lucy Carter?
Oh man, she just looked right at me. I love you, Lucy. You had such a great Q4.
Can we take a selfie, please?
Where'd you get that photo? Your LinkedIn profile. Can I have your coffee, sleeve?
All right. All right, welcome back. We are back for part 3 of our discussion now. We're going to discuss resilience, how to stay ahead, and we'll define resilience. But first, I want to go to another question from another corporate leader.
Hi, my name is Jason Summer. I'm the former general counsel and chief compliance officer at Inogen, which is an oxygen medical device company. In my role as chief compliance officer, we deal with the FDA, HHS, and other state healthcare regulators all the time. And my question is, if we were ever to get an adverse ruling from one of those that we had to communicate to our stakeholders, what do you think is the best strategy for that type of communication?
Okay, thank you, Jason, for that question. Anybody want to answer that question first? No takers here. All right, Rebekah, I'm going to you. What do you think about Jason's question, and what's your take on that?
Yeah, I think, when you're communicating, having a crisis management plan in prep for something like this, and being able to, again, I know we keep saying this on the show here, but communication's key, and being as transparent as you can to how you're going to adapt, because you have to be prepared for either situation, right? So the right crisis scenario would have prepared for it going your way or it not going your way. And that way you're not as caught off guard, and you have a situation planned out. And then it's a matter of communicating and being very transparent with the pros and cons of the outcome.
Yeah, it seems like such basic advice, but it really is solid advice, right, Jeremy? You all have mentioned transparency. And, why is that so key? Because your employees don't want to be left in the dark, right? They want to be part of the solution, I would imagine.
Yeah, these are lessons that have been learned the hard way over time. And I would say that the transparency, it sounds like such a simple concept. And we've seen time and time again, when leaders are under the gun, they default to not using that, not wanting to share that level of information, not wanting to do anything other than play their cards close to their vest. That's why the planning ahead of time, the tabletop exercises, the rehearsals, having more than just a PR firm on retainer, having the experience of going through this and learning these concepts before you're trying to argue with your PR firm about the transparency and messaging that's needed. When you learn the core concepts ahead of time around crisis communication, when you think about those in terms of a real scenario that could impact your organization, but again, as we've said time and time again, not focusing on trying to predict the scenario, but thinking about it from an impact perspective. What are the impacts that you need to be planning for? What's the right messaging in those scenarios? And then taking that into muscle memory, so that when you're thinking about the real event, you've already learned those, you've already practiced those core concepts. So, it's the type of thing that you're not always going to know that these things are coming. You have to have regular planning and a cycle for this so that your leadership team is used to working through these various impacts?
Yeah, because, we all know HHS and the FDA, they don't ever tell you they're coming, right? They just show up, and then your teams need to be prepared. So I guess you always have to be on your toes. And Jenny, to that point, you mentioned earlier that today's Gen Z employees want to feel like their values are aligned with the employer. Can you give us an example of what values they feel so strongly about that they want to sort of match up with their employer?
Oh, sure. I mean, I think a big one here is climate. They want to know, what is my company's climate stance to reduce their consumption or footprint, for example. So a lot of organizations have published more of a climate playbook where they are looking at their different scopes of carbon consumption and offering ways for this generation to participate in making that strategy a success. Part of it isn't just waving the flag and saying, this is our vision. People want to know, how do I actually land the plane and participate in that strategy? So you'll see a big boom in employee resource groups because people want to participate and help out. And we're also seeing, people kind of like, voting with their feet with employers. If their employer doesn't have a strong enough stance on say, their climate position, many people are changing employers because they want a better fit, and in essence, is their way to contribute to society at large. So it's a really interesting time. And, I think back to like the communication of it, it doesn't have to be perfect before messages are launched, right? I think that's where leaders feel a little vulnerable because they're caught off guard by some of these crises. They might not be fully prepared or have all the perfect answers, but most employees care about being included in an imperfect message rather than waiting for a perfect memo to be more seldom. I think more real time and just being, in like transparency, that also brings vulnerability.
Mm-hmm. Well, we all experienced a huge crisis, I guess, hard to imagine 4 years ago now with the pandemic, and we watched how companies dealt with that. And one of the major issues that came out of that was hiring and retaining talent, because employees were able to say, hey, I want to work from home. I want this benefit or that benefit. I want this amount of pay. And the employers were having to pay it to hire and keep employees. Rebekah, is your company Lockton still dealing with that? And what are some competitive strategies that you can share that Lockton is using to hire and keep talent? What kind of benefits are you having to dole out these days?
Yeah, it's interesting times, to say the least. But during COVID, not just Lockton, but a lot of clients we worked with, obviously it was really hard to attract and retain, especially in certain industries, hospitality, food and beverage. There are a lot of industries that struggled, healthcare. And at that time, the strategy was throw the kitchen sink. Because we just need people to stay. So as far as benefits and different rewards that they would see, they threw everything at the kitchen sink, and it worked. And now it's still an issue within the industry, but it's less. We're not seeing the great resignation of employees. And so now what's interesting is having to pivot because you've offered everything. And now you're trying to transition to figure out what do my employees value the most right now? And then the incoming employees that we're trying to hire, what do they value the most? And then how do you navigate doubling down on what they're saying they value the most without articulating that you're taking other things away? Because it's very expensive to offer the kitchen sink. So there's a lot of thought right now and strategy around what benefits are used to attract and retain, what's the most important benefit to the employees now. And it's a complicated situation that we're dealing with a lot of companies right now to help attract and retain.
Well, can you share with us some of the discussion? I mean, what are the key things that employees are looking for today? Is it, higher pay? Is it a health benefits package? Is it vacation time? I mean, what is it?
Yeah, we kind of silo it on a career path. That's how we look at it, because it's different for depending on where someone's at in their career path and what they're trying to attract and retain. That will kind of dictate the benefit that they value the most. So what we've been suggesting to companies is have a baseline of benefits and save those dollars to be able to have people coming in a la carte. So give them a pool of dollars that they can allocate, whether they want pet insurance because maybe they don't want kids. So from, versus a company who maybe needs more women on their board. And studies are showing executive women are having babies later or not at all. And so they may value infertility a little bit. And that's a very expensive benefit. And so it's really looking at, it's not a one size fits all. We're really siloing where are they at in their career path? And then how do you have a plan to be able to give flexibility where they have some choice, but then you're pulling the right levers, but stretching your dollar the furthest it can go to make sure it's really having an impact and they're valuing it, and then checking in. Things are changing so much. You got to check in all the time to make sure that's the right benefit.
So it sounds like you're really sort of tailoring the benefits to the specific employee also.
Yes, that's what we're recommending with a lot of our clients. Yep.
Right.
And I would think, just a quick question is, I would think that mental health is a big driver, right? Rebekah, with the major burnout happening and just a huge amount of stress. I've read a lot of, different sources saying that burnout is the number one, thing we need to triage right now. And through insurance, I feel like that's a way people can feel more supported and maybe open with the challenges they're having with mental health.
Right. Yeah, correct, Jenny. That's like you said earlier, that's a baseline. So that's in my head, that's like a given baseline benefit above and beyond, because that is such a big deal. And that was highlighted through COVID and is still continuing. And there are a lot of factors that come into play with benefits like financial advising. What's causing the stress? Is it the workplace? Is it things at home? Is it elder care? Is it childcare? So mental health is this catch-all topic. And then you've got all these partners underneath that umbrella that need to be there to partner with the employee on really what's causing some of those issues and valuing those secondary partnerships to help.
Yeah, and Rebekah, that's a great point. If I can tack onto that, I think what we're seeing is that, we used to think of the workplace as this sort of sterile environment where those things didn't happen. And we know now from deep experience that all of the mental health percentages across the general population translate into the workplace. So whether it's 1.4% of the population suffering from bipolar disorder or more than 4% of the population suffering from clinical depression, those numbers all translate into the workforce. And employees, for one, expect to be able to have access to the resources to be able to deal with that. They expect to have the employer support. But employers also have to have the right mechanisms in place to be able to assist those employees, to be able to identify those employees and be able to provide that assistance, to provide for all of the proper functioning of the workplace. We're seeing work in healthcare in specific. The rampant increase in violence in the healthcare environment is causing a dramatic increase in turnover. And organizations are turning to having high-performing corporate security teams to be able to ensure that that environment is safe. They're using alternative strategies that we never did think of 20 years ago, and focusing on the identification of these situations before they develop. They're focusing on behavioral threat assessment. They're focusing on being able to support domestic violence and prevent that from coming into the workplace. And so when employers have the right programs in place, when they're taking this proactive, intelligence-led approach to protecting the workplace, that's where we're seeing employee turnover drop. And at almost $50,000 a headcount in some verticals to turn over one employee instance, it's really the right investment. It's not just the right investment to do from a protecting your people standpoint, but it makes good business sense.
Yeah, all of that. Yeah, you guys, great points there. I want to open it up to questions from the audience in just a moment. The producers will let me know if we have some. We got a shout out from Jason there for taking his question before, so that was nice. You're so welcome, Jason. Great question. I want to ask you, the theme of this event is the October Surprise Managing Through Resiliency. Resiliency is how companies hope to come out the other end after the crisis, right? They hope to come out resilient. I want to ask you quickly, what does resiliency mean to you? Jenny, let me start with you.
Good question.
Yeah.
Resilience is really about anticipating what's next, and not only, thinking about what's next as a normal part of your organizational practice, but it's also about thinking ahead and being ready to pivot, right? So when we think about the number of disruptions, they're hard to take time just in this segment for, but it could be the labor challenges we've had with the skills gap. We will need to upskill. We are seeing 20% of our population suffer from ADHD. So how are we thinking about autism and neurodiversity and bringing that into our normal conversations about what's happening today and preparing for what we might need in the future, even though it hasn't arrived yet. So, definitely looking around the corner and looking at those macro trends from economics to political to the workforce and labor demographics. What might we anticipate coming our way? And what might be right for our own individual company? Those are exercises that are so important to have a healthy return to continue to increase innovation and preparedness as just a norm practice for the organization.
Mm-hmm. So looking ahead, really, and anticipating is what you're saying. Rebekah, do you agree with that? It's interesting. I did a story recently for Fox News about what makes people wise. And there was a list of 8 themes that made people wise, according to this study. It was a scientific study. And the number one theme was resilience. People who are resilient are also wise. Do you agree with that? And keeping in this theme, Jenny says, looking ahead, but what else to be resilient?
Yes. Yeah. I think Jenny nailed the definition. I think to add to that, resiliency is taking your known risk and then you're emerging, like Jenny just talked about, and making sure you've got plans. But more importantly, it's also making sure you're building a positive risk culture. It's one thing to have a flexibility of options depending on outcomes from a board perspective, from the executive perspective and the C-level. That's absolutely vital. It needs to be top down. But a lot of times I do see where resiliency can falter is where you're not building that kind of culture within your people. And what happens is, occasionally you'll have a risk comes that you didn't plan for, and the executive team going through that and the people going through that, it builds a resilience muscle. And so I think taking it one step further is making sure you're building a resilient organization, not just from a board level and a C level on the emerging risk and known risk, but also from the employee perspective and managers and all levels, making sure they can get through it as well too. And you can come out stronger and actually view disruption as a competitive advantage. Some of the best organizations through COVID we saw came out on the other side, not only survived it, but thrived. And that's amazing when you can look at a disruption and actually thrive through it and see that as a competitive advantage because you were prepared.
Yeah, wonderful. Jeremy, we have a question from the audience, so I'm going to throw this one at you. This is from a viewer. This person asks, CFOs, GCs, CEOs, CHROs, they all have their own area of focus, of course. So what 2 to 3 questions should they be asking their C-suiters to be sure they are ready for whatever may come? What questions should they be asking? And that's a great question, by the way. Thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think most importantly is what we've talked about. Has the C-suite practiced this? Is there more than just a plan on a shelf? We've talked about this aspect of preparedness before, and I think that's the number one thing to be able to navigate. It's more than just having the plan on the shelf. It's knowing that the C-suite is regularly practicing dealing with various impacts. And I might take a little bit of a different spin on the definition of resiliency than just looking forward, because I think there is a tendency to try and look forward and predict what's going to happen so we can be ready for it. It's human nature. I think the real definition of resilience to us is when you can bounce back stronger than you were before the event. And so from that standpoint, we want to see, can an organization not take permanent damage? Is the stock price, McDonald's, for example, took the 7% stock price hit. We know that prepared organizations that have done effective crisis preparation and impact planning, their stock price actually bounces back to above the baseline, above the pre-crisis baseline. So are organizations prepared to that level? Have you had any kind of outside evaluation as to your readiness? Have you tested that your plans are in place? Do you have the right tools to communicate with your people? We're all used to communicating over our IT networks, over the standard tools, but if your IT network is down, do you have the ability to communicate effectively with your employees? We've talked about all of the elements of communication today in terms of transparency, expertise, empathy, and commitment to solving the problem. But if you can't communicate with your employees because your IT network is down, then you can't communicate at all. You can't communicate any of those elements. So thinking about, one, do you have the right preparedness in place from the planning that's taking place? Do you have the right tools in place? And then are you skilled at it? Are you keeping that sharp? Are you repeating it over and over again so that you're ready when that impact happens? Those are the three questions that I'd be asking our C-suiters.
Yeah, and it's so basic, right? If you can't communicate because your IT system is down, then that's a big problem. You got to anticipate that. So the themes I'm hearing from you guys are, anticipation, preparedness, looking ahead, all of the important things you have to do to manage through a crisis. So I just want to go around and get some final thoughts that tools that you can give our audience today that are logged in and watching this, that they're thinking about the election and they're thinking about other things that are happening overseas, in different places, different hotspots around the world. What advice can you offer? And if you could just weave in quickly, because we only have about 2 minutes left, something that you've had to deal with and where you've come out successful the other side. Quickly, Jenny, I'll go to you first.
Okay. Well, I think a first takeaway I would say is to just expand our lexicon of what safety and risk really means at your own company. For example, moving not only past just the physical safety realm, but remember that, Gen Z, they want a safe working environment. Weave this into your employee value proposition. It will boost your innovation and loyalty from your employees and make it a regular habit talking about, social, ethical safety, psychological safety, and yes, the physical part of it, because it really is an investment worth making. And then the second question, I would say, resilience might be a personal thing, being let go from an organization and coming back stronger with bigger, better clients.
Okay, I like that. Rebekah, what about you?
I would just say, a lot of it we've talked about at a high level, but historically speaking, risk and resiliency has been siloed into more of a risk management. And historically, we've seen it siloed within a couple different verticals with some different C-levels. And now more than ever, you need to be seeing interdisciplinary approaches and creative ways to look at it, because the risk, because we're so connected at a global level on a lot of different ways, the risk now are more complex than they've ever been. And you're going to have the initial impact, and then you're going to have the second and third impact, like an earthquake.
Yeah, no kidding.
And sorry, keep going.
Sorry, for time purposes, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to cut you off. And Jeremy, I'm sorry, I owe you time on the next one, but that brings us to the end of our panel. Thank you so much to our excellent panel, Jeremy, Jenny, and Rebekah. And thanks all of you for watching, and stay tuned for the next C-Suite Focus. We'll have some good ones for you. Have a great night, everyone.
Thanks, Anita.
Thanks, Anita.
Thank you, Anita.